Today, we are talking to the wife of the husband-in-law, and if that sounds confusing, you'll have to just stay tuned and listen. I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. It's all about leaning in with love. I'm Cameron. I spent years building my career and creating a life I loved. And when my Prince Charming finally showed up, he had 4 kids in tow. Fast forward through lots of mistakes made and lessons learned, stepfamily life was much more complicated than I realized. If you're looking for help with blended family life, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries, where we keep it real as we dish about all the things. This is your weekly dose of blended family inspiration and encouragement. You're not the wicked stepmother, so let me help you find your fairy tale ending. Come on, let's do this. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries. I'm so excited about today's guest. I really think you're going to enjoy her message. It's all about how you can lead with love. So today I am speaking with Jessica Frew, who is a wife, an ex-wife, a mom, a stepmom, and a bold action taker. She has a successful podcast called Husband-in-Law that she records with her husband, Matt, and her ex-husband, Steve. Together, they share their stories of love, marriage, coming out, divorce, remarriage, and co-parenting, all to help others know they are not alone. They also co-own The Bold Logic, which is a company devoted to helping people go from living in an I should mindset to taking bold action towards keeping and reclaiming their sense of self. Jessica is a firm believer that by knowing and understanding what it is you really want in life, you can boldly create a life you love, no matter what your circumstances. Jessica is also a speaker at our upcoming Stepmom Summit, August 26th to 28th, which we're really excited about. You can get a free ticket to the summit online at thestepmomsummit.com. We will have links to the summit and to all the places that you can connect with her in the show notes at thiscustomlife.com/episode 29. So let's dive in. This is going to be a good one. Jessica, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So let's dive in. I feel like there's so much to talk about with your story. I love, first of all, I mentioned to you guys that Jessica has a podcast with her ex-husband and her current husband. Actually, I hate the term current husband. Let's just say with your husband, called Husband-in-Law. And I love the podcast description that you, your husband, and your ex-husband walk listeners through the science of making relationships successful. So that our listeners know your story, you were happily married for 7 years until your husband, Steve, came out as gay. Now you're happily married to Matt, and the two of you and Steve have a relationship that I think by most standards is considered atypical. So that's sort of the nutshell for our listeners. But of course, I want to know more, and I know everyone listening today does too. So tell me how you met both of them. Give me the story. Tell me all the things.
Of course. Yes. So I met Steve in college. And it was kind of funny because I guess he had seen me around campus. I lived a block away from him. He'd seen me walking to and from school. We were at the language lab at the same time, and he saw me there. And I never noticed him. And then one day, I had to go to a choir concert. I was a music major at the time, and I was sitting at this choir concert, and I was about to stand up and leave. It's like, I don't want to be here tonight. It was a requirement, but I was like, I'll just get the requirement some other way. And as I'm thinking this line of girls walks in and they sit down in front of me, and there's this one guy at the end and there's no room for him on the bench. So he comes and sits by me. He got my phone number, asked me out the next day. We went out that next night and we were together like every chance we could get after that. It was really like one of those easy relationships. We just connected. Not to say that there weren't ups and downs and like things along the way, but we really just loved being together and had fun together. And so we continued forward in that. We got married. We met in February and we got married in December. So it was relatively quick, and really just had a fun time together. Steve came to terms with his fact he was gay about a year and a half into our marriage, and we were married for a total of 7 years.
So you were married a total of 7 years, but now did he tell you a year and a half in that he thought he might be gay?
So about 6 months in, I found a bunch of gay pornography on our computer. And I thought, okay, most straight men, most straight men don't look at gay porn. I know there are some, but more than likely, my husband's gay. So we had a whole conversation then, and he was still very much in denial. We were raised in a very conservative Christian religion, and that just wasn't something he allowed himself to embrace about him, is that he could possibly be gay. And so a year and a half or a year later, he was in counseling, and the counselor was like, yes, these things you're struggling with are issues, but the real issue is you're gay. And so it was at that point that we started having open conversations about the fact that, yes, he was gay. How do we navigate this? Do we want to stay married? What does this look like for us continuing forward? And we both at that time were very happy in our marriage, and Steve was not ready to come out. And so we continued forward and stayed married for another 5.5 years after that. And had a daughter 5 years in. She was 2 when we got divorced. It was a very non-traditional, I would say, marriage in some ways, but also very fulfilling in all of the ways you would expect. People always like, well, what was the sex like? Like, what was your sex life like? And we were very intimate and very fulfilled in that area. But I think that's because we had such a close emotional connection, because we knew so much about each other and shared the things that we were kind of scared to share with anybody else. And so there was a deep emotional connection that I think carried us through in all aspects of our marriage until they didn't. Steve ended up having an affair just before our 7-year wedding anniversary. And at that point, he was no longer attracted to me, and we were a mess trying to figure that out and work through the affair. We spent a couple months doing that. We took just a couple weeks separation because, again, we weren't ready to tell everybody what was going on. But we knew if we were apart longer than that, people would start asking. And Steve just wasn't ready to officially be out until he had worked through some feelings. But we ended up getting divorced and really had to rethink what our life and our relationship looked like, how we wanted it to look going forward. And ultimately, for me, in that moment of getting divorced, I really narrowed in, like, what is my greatest fear around getting divorced? And that was what it looked like for my daughter. We had this little 2-year-old, and how does her life look going from here? The only thing I'd ever seen of divorce was bitterness and anger and resentment and arguing, and I did not want that for her. I did not want her to show up at her wedding or her graduation or any big event in her life and be worried about mom and dad being in the same room.
And so we really made it.
Yes. Like, I've watched friends carry that load, and my heart breaks for them, because here on these days that should be filled with joy and excitement for them, they're concerned about their parents. And so that was one thing that we really focused on going through our divorce. I met Matt a year later. He and Steve, so my ex-husband and my husband, had actually become friends, not like close acquaintances, but they knew each other because they ended up mountain biking together through a mutual friend. And they would meet at my apartment complex, because that's where the mutual friend also lived, and take off mountain biking together. And so one night when they were going mountain biking, Steve introduced me to Matt, and turns out he actually went to church with me and things, which I had not realized before. And I told Steve, like, a couple days later, I said, I'm going to marry Matt Frew. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, I don't know. I used to make fun of people who said stuff like this, but I've never even really talked to him. I just met him. I'm going to marry that man. And he's like, okay, whatever, Jess. And it took a little bit of time later to convince him to date me. He was dating another girl named Jessica at the time. And he's like, I'm really flattered you want to date me, but I can't yet. And so 9 months later, he broke up with her, and we started dating and ended up getting married very quickly. So yeah, that's how I met both of my husbands. And
I love it. And I love the fact that you guys have been able to, I think so often when partners get divorced, they get so caught up in what went wrong in their relationship, in
Yes.
their marriage. And you guys were able to really hold on to the pieces of each other that you loved and respected and kind of carry forward that positivity rather than dwelling on the things that went wrong, which is really amazing. I mean, like really unusual, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. And you are 100% right. That is what we really latched onto during that time is the parts of our relationship that we loved and that we wanted to keep intact. And what we really wanted for our daughter, like we somehow, in the midst of the pain and the heartache and the mourning of what we thought our lives would look like, we latched on to that idea that we can create something different. We can still love each other and have the good parts of our relationship. We just have to figure out what that looks like for us. Now, that isn't to say that we didn't allow each other to feel the heartache and there were moments of anger and bitterness. But we presented those in a way that it was understood that we weren't trying to take that out on the other person. We weren't trying to blame the other person for the end of our marriage. We just needed to feel those things because they're real and they do need to be felt and they need to be dealt with and healed from. And we were able to support each other through that and recognize that it didn't change what we ultimately wanted for our relationship and for our daughter. They were just the real feelings we were having at the time.
Gosh, that's just so amazing. I feel like it's an example for so many people, of what you wish that you could see when people split up. I mean, I know my husband has a very high conflict relationship with his ex-wife, and my parents had a very high conflict relationship with each other when they got divorced. And, I've seen what it does to kids. And I wish, and I tell my husband and I tell my stepkids all the time, I'm sorry that your parents don't get along. It's, I know that it's really hard for you to have to consider all of that and deal with all that, and I think it's hardest on the kids, so how wonderful that your daughter can grow up.
Yeah.
It's obviously a different environment than you thought she'd be growing up in, right? But she's growing up with, 3 parents who adore her, and that's amazing.
Yeah. And in that, I want to make sure it's clear that we have that opposite relationship on the other side with Matt's ex-wife. So I have 2 stepkids, and we experienced that other high conflict relationship. And I had to mourn that relationship too, because I thought I was going to get the same thing I had with Steve with Matt's ex. I was honestly excited. It's like, yes, I get to bring this other person in. I get to create this relationship with her and we get to parent together and all of these things. And while that lasted for a hot minute, like a year into our marriage, it went south very quickly. And I had to mourn the loss of what I thought that relationship could look like as well. And to realize that what is best for the kids is to have, these very strict boundaries. I think boundaries, we often say they're to shut people out, but they are actually to bring people in and to invite peace into our lives. But yes, in this case, it was we needed boundaries so that we could have a relationship that serves the kids. And it was hard to wrap my head around the fact that that looks very different from what serves my daughter and what's going to serve my husband's kids. And yes, you're right. I feel for them that they don't get what my daughter gets in the relationship with their parents, or her relationship with me. It is heartbreaking, but it's okay. There can be peace around that. There can be stability there still.
But good for you in recognizing the need to sort of grieve those expectations. I think one of the most challenging things that stepmoms face is this divergence of what they expected stepmom life to look like versus the reality of what it actually is. And I think a lot of times that does come into play when you're dealing with your partner's ex and if it's a high conflict situation. Yes. And I know for me, I can't tell you how many times I've just thought to myself, why won't you like me?
Yes.
Instead, I should be saying to myself, okay, what boundaries do I need to put into place to keep my sanity and to keep me peaceful? And I had to kind of come to terms with that and realize that too. But I think a lot of, most of us really we want to do a good job as stepmoms. And we want people to like us. And that's just not always the reality of the
No,
situation.
no, I have found that accepting that I'm not going to be liked brings so much more peace to our family than trying to force that.
Totally.
Um, one of the hardest times in my life was after Matt and I got married. I always say that for me, remarriage was so much harder than my divorce. My divorce was hard in its own ways, but being a stepmom and embracing this new life was really when I almost lost myself and struggled to find who I was because I was trying to prove my worth and trying to get people to like me. I wanted them to like me because I thought that was what was best for all of us. And really, that was not what was best for all of us. Instead, me stepping back and letting that relationship run its course was what was best for all of us, and showing up where I can and how I can. And it's far different from what I ever dreamed it would look like. And that's okay.
And that is okay. And it's a hard lesson to learn. I mean, I think,
It is.
I always see the memes and talk about the fact that, no little girl sits playing with her Barbies dreaming of, the day that she'll grow up and marry a dad,
Yeah. Yeah.
But here we are, and it's our own special kind of fairy tale, right?
Yep.
And it's up
Yep.
to us to make the happy endings.
For sure.
Now, so y'all talk about almost everything on the podcast, and you're really open with each other. But I really want to know, surely there are some topics that are off limits. What do you not discuss amongst the three of you?
Yeah. So it's funny because there is one story that I've said I will never share. And we're going to be sharing it we're on like a temporary break from our podcast, and we are sharing that when we come back. So I'm not going to drop it here, but it was one topic that I've said is off limits. And like Steve has a topic that's off limits, and that's his relationship with his dad. But also he's getting to where, I feel like I'm in a place where I can share this. And I think that is what's off limits, is understanding that we need to heal from those things, from the situation, from the story, from whatever, and let go of the shame we carry around it to be able to share it. So there are things that are happening in our lives currently that we're not going to talk about until we know that it's not going to damage our own mental health, the mental health of our children, because even though we didn't want them to listen to the podcast quite yet, they have some of them listen to it. And that's okay. But so there's things like that we aren't going to share right this second because it's still healing. And I always think of Brene Brown when I talk about this. And, you share once the healing's done. You share once you're ready. And so there are certain things currently that go on that we have not talked about. Or there are a couple things that have happened with Matt's ex in the past that, we would love to share just because we know people relate and understand. We share lots of the huge things, but there are also things that we know it's not the right time, and that there will be a time that is okay to share. So I think those are, the main topics. The things that are going to damage any of our mental health right now or our loved ones' mental health, we shy away from it until we know it is the right time to share. But we honestly, that being said, basically put everything out there because it's real. And especially like growing up in a conservative Christian church, oftentimes we hide what we're going through to show up in a way that looks right, that looks like it's how we should be living, that presents, and I think this is life in general, not just in religion, but I hear that a lot in religion, that people aren't real about who they are because they want to portray themselves as living this perfect life. And I can't bring myself to do that. My life is far from perfect. There are some things I am doing awesome at, and there are things that I have blundered and messed up along the way. And that's okay. If we didn't, we wouldn't learn and grow. So, but it is knowing when to share
true.
that and when to put it out there.
That's such a great outlook. So going back to, you referenced the religious differences and stuff. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because it's something I think that, and I grew up very religious. I still am very religious. My mother-in-law and her husband are both a priest and a bishop in the Episcopal Church. And, I very much value that background for me and for my life. But I know that in some stepmoms' lives, that can cause sort of shame because of the emphasis on traditional families and, the kind of how divorce is looked upon and how being gay is looked upon and all that kind of stuff. And I know that that can be really difficult. So talk to me a little bit about how you guys have navigated all of that.
So what it comes down to for me and for my husband, Matt, Steve is no longer religious, which is great, wonderful. I think he should live his life as he feels he was created to live. So that's what it comes down to for me, is I am not here to judge how other people live. And if everybody lived like me, I would never learn to love as Christ loved. And for me, that is what I am sent here to do, is to love people. And that's the example that I hold on to from Christ, is being able to love other people, to help them have their own
Amen.
epiphanies of where they should be called to love or how they should live their lives, because they were created the way they are for a reason. I do not doubt that they were created to be who they were called to be. And that is not going to look like me. And that is amazing, because then I get to learn to love them. They get to learn to love me. And that is the whole point. I firmly believe we have a plan here, that each of us were sent with some sort of plan on this earth, with agency. Like, we have that agency to choose how we live within that. But just as much as their plan doesn't look like my plan, I need their plan to be able to live mine. And I know it sounds a little like, I don't know, but for me, that's how I view it. And for me, that's how I find love and peace and joy and comfort in people living differently than me. I'm not supposed to judge. I'm supposed to love. And while I don't do that perfectly, I try my best when I feel those feelings of judgment and I start thinking those things, whether it's for myself or somebody else, to think, wait a second. What's really the issue here? What am I really struggling with? How should I view this differently, so that I can love people in a more genuine, real way? And Steve, my ex, has been very respectful of my religious beliefs. I mean, he was in this church. He knows what I believe, but he also knows that I don't judge him for the way he lives his life differently than me. I support him. I want him to be happy. I genuinely have shown that through my actions. I mean, it's been 16, I don't know, years or so now, 17 years that we've been a part of each other's lives. And he believes that. And therefore, we can be honest about the way we're living. We can show each other love. We can know what's going on in the other one's lives. I always say I feel like a little bit selfish sometimes by the fact that we communicate so openly, and because I love him so much, he'll tell me anything, because it's like I have insight into everything that's going on in my daughter's lives, which is so great and feels selfish in a way, but also what a blessing for us, each other, and for our daughter. It just comes back to you. Love always comes back to you. And it doesn't mean we don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean we have to let ourselves be used and abused, but it means that we genuinely try to love. So that's how we have kind of meshed those two things. For me, I am sent here to love, and that is what I will do. It might look different from like my church, but from the gospel at its core of what I feel I am taught in the scriptures, it comes back to love. So that's my deal.
Amen. I totally agree. I think that, if you can lean into whatever family life you're in, whether it's a step family, a traditional family, whatever your family looks like, you can lean into it and approach everything from the lens of love, then you've probably got a good start on being able to handle whatever's thrown at you.
Yeah. And going back to taking that stigma of being a stepmom away or being divorced or whatever, I always go back to scripture that says men are that they might have joy. And if you are not finding joy in your relationship, you're not supposed to stay there. You don't have to stay there. If you can find that joy, great. But just because you made one decision and it didn't work out how you thought it would, because whatever reason, the other person has agency to do those things, it just isn't what you thought it would be, you don't have to stay. You were created to have joy and to find that in whatever way works for you. And that's partially why I speak up, is because I want people to understand it's okay to be different than what we thought our lives would look like. It's okay to step out of that norm of the religious, you don't get divorced, the stigma around loving our queer community, all of those things.
I love it. So, I mean, it sounds like the three of you, and I said this at the beginning, and I just am sort of reveling in my astoundment that, y'all really do approach things as openly and as lovingly with each other as you do. So how did you decide to start this podcast? I mean, were y'all just sort of sitting around one day and like, oh, we should use this to help other people? Or how did this all come about? Because it is really a fascinating, and entertaining and great example, that y'all are setting for other people.
Yeah, so it was kind of like an evolution of ideas. Matt and Steve for a couple years had talked about starting like an Instagram handle where they just share their relationship, like just a platform to where they share, because we had seen time and time again by sharing just the generals of our story that first and foremost, we get along as co-parents, as exes. And then secondly, that we get along being in the church and Steve being gay and all of these things. People were just mind blown and wanted to know more. And we thought we can help people here. We can help people. And so after them talking about it for a couple years, I had gotten to a place emotionally in our marriage where I was like, I am ready for more now. Up until that year, I was not ready. And this was like 2.5 years ago. And we are 8 years into our marriage. I was like, I am ready to take on something new. And I thought, this is it. I always knew we would share our story. And I was like, this is the right time to do it. And so I approached Steve and Matt and I said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I want to do a podcast. I think we could do this and we can help people. And so they're like, okay, we're in. Steve's like, you're not sharing my story without me being there. I'm like, okay, come do it. So he's like, all right, I'm in. But the first time we recorded, Steve totally shut down, like he completely fell apart. And it was interesting because I've seen him do that before. Like I watched him like just go pale as we were recording. And he's just like, I just have so much shame about what I did. He had an affair and some things. And he's like, I just have not released that shame. I don't think I can do this. I said, it's fine. Like take some time to process. We're in no rush. And a couple weeks later, he came back and he said, Jessica, I just keep thinking what it would have been like for me going through this if I had heard this story, if I had heard somebody else's story and the hope I could have had from that, whether it looked exactly the same as theirs or not, taking that hope and continuing forward. And he's like, it would be selfish of me not to do this because I know that it would have helped me. And so he came back around and he's like, let's do this. And we started recording and he was able to do that. And we've just continued forward ever since. And it has been an opportunity to help people to rethink their relationships, not just their co-parenting relationships. We get people who have like healed relationships with their parents and like all of these things. I'm like, this is amazing. And so exciting. And what a simple gift we can give to other people just by sharing what we have to share. So that's how it all started.
So great. Well, we're so excited for you to speak at our Stepmom Summit in just a couple of weeks. We cannot wait. And I know you are sitting down with my co-founder, Beth, to talk about LGBTQ issues and blended families with religious differences. So there's like a lot there.
Yes.
But without giving too much away, give us like a little bit of a sneak peek about what we're going to learn from you.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of already have. We've touched the tip of the iceberg of how we navigate these relationships and make them all work. And how I told Beth at the beginning, I said, honestly, being a stepmom has been an ongoing process of letting go of control. And of course, the way I thought my life should look. And
Amen.
we really dive into those things around this idea of what we've been taught in our religions, in our belief systems, and how we navigate that and how we can open our hearts and minds up to loving other people who are different than us.
I love it. It's going to be such a great talk. And I'll put all of Jessica's links and the Stepmom Summit links in the show notes for this episode, which you can find at thiscustomlife.com/episode 29. So one other question before we start to wrap up. So tell me, what are some assumptions that sort of straight, and I keep using the term traditional, but I think that's really a bad term to use these days because I think there's not really a traditional family in any. I think all families have got their stuff, but what are some assumptions that straight blended families may have about your dynamic that you would want to debunk them of?
So first and foremost, we get asked a lot if we're actually a throuple, like if there's some, like we're messing around on the side, and we are not. It is truly just a friendship. People always say, well, you must still be in love with him or something. And I'm not. It's like this, our relationship has shifted. Steve feels like a brother to me. I care about him that deeply and want him to be happy, and he is a part of my family. But there's no attraction. I often just look at him and think, how were we married? Like, I love and care about you, but how were we ever together? Which I think a lot of people can relate to with their exes. But so that's a misconception that happens a lot. There was one other one that I thought of, and now it is slipping my mind. And honestly, another thing I get is that there's no way Matt's really okay with mine and Steve's relationship, that my husband is not okay with how Steve and I are. And I worry about that occasionally, but I check in with Matt a lot. I say, hey, is this thing okay? Is it okay if we do this? How do you feel if this happens? And there are things that he says, yeah, maybe not. And there are things that he's like, yeah, that's totally fine. And so I think that's a lot of what happens. I just thought of the other thing, the main one. People tell me that it was easier for me to walk away from my marriage or to accept my divorce because Steve was gay, had an affair with a man, not a woman, and these things. And that's just not true. The pain, the hurt is still real, no matter what the situation, no matter what you are going through. Mm-hmm. It was different, I am sure, but it's still painful. And so I think people are like, well, you don't really understand how a divorce feels or how to navigate this, whatever, those types of things. And I'm like, I still lost the relationship I thought I would have. I am still parenting with somebody who is living a life completely different than the one we agreed to when we had a kid. And so I'm still navigating all of those things. And so that's a big one that I think people who are in a straight heterosexual relationship often throw out there. And it's always interesting to me to hear their reasons why and those dynamics. And those are, I get it. Like I understand, but until you think about it from another way, it's like, oh yeah, these are still real issues. These are still similar feelings and things that you go through, even though it's different.
Yeah, totally. That's a really good way to look at it. And I feel like I've heard people say that before, that it must be easier if, but it's never really easy. I mean, These are all really hard things to go through, no matter what your circumstance is. Well, before we wrap, I always love to ask a fun question, which is, what are you binge watching right now?
So most recently, I was binge watching Schitt's Creek. I put off watching that show forever. And then I watched it one day. I was like, I can't stop. Like, I love these people. And it's just so funny and also makes you cry and makes you feel all of the feelings. It's just great.
It's all the things. Yeah, we binge watched that over a weekend and it's amazing. Like that whole show is just so great.
So good. So good.
I love it. Well, so where can people find you, Jessica?
Yeah, so I am on any podcasting platform under husband-in-law. That is how Steve and Matt refer to each other. So that is the title of our podcast. We're also on
I
Instagram
love
on
it.
husband-in-law. We don't do much on Facebook. You will find our page there, but I will warn you, we are not very active on Facebook. So Instagram and our podcast are the two best places to find us and follow along.
Perfect. And again, we'll have all of your links in our show notes, which you can find at thiscustomlife.com/episode 29. Well, Jessica, this was so fun. I'm so glad that you were able to be here, and I cannot wait to see your presentation at the summit in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having me.
We will see you next time on the Stepmom Diaries. That's it for this week. If you've enjoyed our chat, I hope you'll help spread the word. Share this episode with friends and head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review. And don't forget, for more great stepmom content, head on over to thiscustomlife.com and follow me on social media. Just search This Custom Life on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Until next time, you keep being you and know that we are in this together. See you here next week.